What's up, everybody? Welcome into the first day of the actual trial for Alec Baldwin regarding the shooting on the Rust set and the death of Helena Hutchins. We're going to focus on opening statements today, figure out what the theory is for each side. What are their main arguments going to be? What can we focus in on? See what the evidence points to, because that's what the jury learns from the roadmap of opening statements. We'll also summarize and talk about the first couple witnesses called by the state today. We'll see who's winning after day one, right? It's going to be a good battle between some good lawyers on this case. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hit the like button. Subscribe to our page if you haven't already, because this is day one of a trial. We're planning on doing daily recaps and reactions of, if you're interested. If not, we can do one or two a week until we get a verdict in this case and discuss why and how we got there. All right. So before we got to opening statements, the judge gave instructions. And in her initial instructions, she makes sure to let the jury know that this trial is going to be filmed, but they will not be filmed. That's important. Number one. Number two, she reads the actual criminal charges, which I also think is really interesting, because when we get to what the theories of the case are, that's going to be important. She first reads that he either caused the death of Helena Hutchins by negligent use of a firearm, or number two, in the alternative, meaning can't be guilty on both, without due caution or circumspection, caused the death by an act with total disregard of safety of others, and a reasonable person would know that it would anticipate that death would occur under the circumstances or actions that he was taking. Okay? So what you don't hear there is any criminal mens rea. You don't hear any intent. He does not have to intend to misuse the firearm. He does not have to intend to shoot anybody or hurt anybody. It's a negligent act. It's something that a reasonable person wouldn't do. So that's important. And that's coming from the judge's mouth before we even hear opening statements. Then the judge lets the jury know off the jump, there will be no transcripts in this trial available to you. So make sure you're paying attention and taking notes if you want to. I see some people asking about the YSL stuff. My dad and I are going to break down the newest motion later this week when we have some time to break it down. The judge also lets them know that the schedule for the trial is 8:30 to 5 o'clock, 1 hour for lunch, a morning break and an afternoon break, Wednesday through Friday this week, Monday through Friday next week. And it sounds like deliberations will start the following Monday, because that's just for the actual trial and testimony and arguments. The jury can ask questions in this case. 8 days seems like it's going to be fast, but I got to be honest, after day one, this feels like a much tighter trial, a much tighter presentation of the evidence and the facts by the state, just after the first couple witnesses, when comparing it with the Hannah Gutierrez Reed trial. And we're already seeing less focus on the dummy rounds. They're still talking about them, of course, the blanks and how they got there and things like that, and more focus on firearm safety and what Alec Baldwin did. And as always, I like to start off by talking about opening statements with the opening line and kind of getting to understand the theme of each side's case. And the state did that right off the beginning of their opening statement, and that's where we're going to start.
When someone plays make-believe with a real gun in a real-life workplace, and while playing make-believe with that gun violates the cardinal rules of firearm safety, people's lives are endangered and someone could be killed.
So right off the rip, and I think some reports were coming out about jury selection, and a lot of the jurors or prospective jurors have firearm experience. They talked about knowing what to do and firearm safety and never point a gun at somebody and always assume a gun is loaded. That's how you should act, things like that. People are asking to bump the volume up. I'll bump it up a little bit. So that is what the prosecutor's picking up on. And people are saying weak intro. But, and again, we weren't in the room for jury selection, but if the jurors were focused on that, and you know your jurors sitting there, and your jurors sitting there know about the cardinal rules of firearm safety and he violated them, you might have hooked them. So it's specific to these jurors.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this case is about. It's simple, it's straightforward. The evidence will show that someone who played make-believe with a real gun and violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety is the defendant, Alexander Baldwin. You will hear over the course of the next few days that in the fall of 2021, a movie called Rust began filming at the Bonanza Creek Ranch just south of Santa Fe in Santa Fe County. You will learn that this movie was a Western with a lot of gun action. And while it was a movie set, it was a real life workplace for many people. But you will hear this workplace was on a tight budget. And you will learn that some of the people who were hired to work at this workplace were very inexperienced.
So they also get into, right off the jump, some of the similarities with the Hannah Gutierrez retrial. And all right. I don't know what the heck just happened, but I got booted from StreamYard. So we're bringing it back up now. All right. So anyways, they mention Hannah Gutierrez Reed. They mention the tight budget. They mention the inexperience of some of the staff, but it's not a main focus. And I think that's smart to not focus on that. People said we lost Peter. I just want to make sure everybody's back. Is everybody still back? The chat is usually a little behind, but all right. It's all right. We roll on. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what the heck happened there. It's so annoying, dude. Internet, technology, StreamYard just booting me. All so annoying, but we're here. We're here. I apologize, folks. All right. So she explains the background of Rust. She talks about how there were some talented people on set, like Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza. Specifically, she mentions, specifically does not mention Alec Baldwin. Love him or hate him. I think at least some people would say that he's talented. He wanted the biggest gun. You'll hear from the guy who built this gun, that all the protocols, safety concerns, checks, it was in perfect working order when it got to the movie set and for Alec Baldwin. Okay? And they're going to focus on some of the defense arguments right from opening statement, because they know the defense is going to argue the gun malfunctioned, it was broken, they didn't get to test it, it's a problem, and he didn't do anything intentional. They know that that's what he's going to do based on some of the pretrial motions. So she hits some of that in opening, and I thought that was a good idea. And I thought her opening moved smoothly, moved pretty quickly, and hit some of the most important points. And we're going to listen to another chunk of it right here. By the way, they don't talk about the producer theory, but I think some points were still left in opening and some of the stuff they do in case they could have. You can tell the defense, I think, would have sounded completely different if the producer theory would have been allowed in. And if you weren't here for the pretrial motions video, they wanted to talk about how he was the producer and in charge of all the safety overarching across the whole movie set, and the judge would not allow them to argue that. It's not relevant to what they charged him with, was as the actor, what he did with the firearm.
He had to do was just insert the pin, and that's it. And then Mr. Kenny had the firearms, this one and some other firearms, transferred to the set of Rust at the Bonanza Creek Ranch. And on October 13th, 2021, the defendant was supposed to have a training session with this gun and this young armorer. But you will see that during this training session, the defendant had somebody or a couple of people filming him while he's running around shooting this gun. You will learn, ladies and gentlemen, or you'll hear during this trial, the use of the words prop gun. And you'll learn a prop gun is this real gun. It's not a toy. It's not made of rubber. It's a real gun. You will also see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that during the days before that fateful October 21st day, the defendant handled this firearm multiple occasions. You will see video footage of the defendant firing this firearm, working perfectly fine.
Again, hitting some of the defenses. He has used it. He fired it. He knew how to use it on set. And you'll see how he was using it negligently, basically, but the firearm wasn't broken. Everything was fine.
You'll see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that each time the defendant handled this firearm, he did not do a safety check with that inexperienced armorer.
He did not do a safety check each time he used the firearm with that inexperienced armorer who he also was supposed to have a training session with, but instead was filming other things. So that's how they're kind of setting the stage here. It wasn't just one time. This is how Alec Baldwin always used the firearm on set.
And you'll hear that the reason he didn't do a safety check is because he didn't want to offend her. The evidence you will see will paint a real-life picture of a real-life workplace where this defendant mishandled this gun. You will see him using this gun as a pointer to point at people, to point at things. You will see him cock the hammer when he's not supposed to cock the hammer.
These are the important factors. And again, she opened up with he broke the cardinal rules of firearm safety. And then what does she do? She says, this is what we're going to show you. You're going to see him using it as a pointer, waving it around, cocking the hammer, doing things he's not supposed to do. So she's laying out exactly what 101 type rules he broke that they're going to prove to this jury. So that's the way you set up your theory in your case. So if the jury agrees with you, right, they might not agree with you. They might not think that that's a big deal. They might not think that's breaking the rules. They might not think that he did anything wrong. They might not think it's criminal. Fine. All those things might be true. But if, and you know the jury from jury selection, if they're with you and they start to walk, she's got him going in the direction she needs him to go. And that's really all you can ask for from opening statements.
You will see him put his finger on the trigger when his finger's not supposed to be on the trigger.
And we know that's important because he says he didn't pull the trigger. But, there's some very interesting verbiage coming from the defense on that. And you can also look at the defense attorney in the back. He's locked in on the jury. Are they buying this? Are they with her? Can I get them with me?
You will hear about numerous breaches of firearm safety with this defendant and this use of this firearm. And the evidence will show that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, the camera crew walked off set. And you will learn that one of the reasons that camera crew walked out is because they were concerned over safety breaches with the use of firearms.
I think she packaged that nicely because we know it was a lot more than that. A lot more than that. But she said one of the reasons was for firearm safety. Now, will that come back to bite her when it seems like it was for other things? We'll see. But as far as framing and opening, I think it was effective.
The evidence will show that the morning of October 21st started out a couple of hours behind. They filmed some scenes at this church on the Bonanza Creek Ranch. And you will see that one of those scenes required the defendant to pull out his gun. This was in the morning. Pull out his gun. And you'll hear the director tell him, pull it out and hold it. And the first time, you'll see evidence the defendant does what the director tells him. But you will hear the director tell you that many times the defendant would do his own thing. So then the director in the morning asked him, okay, do it again, just like you did now. The defendant pulls out the gun, but this time he cocks the hammer. The evidence will show they then broke for lunch. And around 1:30 or so, they came back to this church to do what's called a blocking. The evidence will show that Ms. Hutchins wanted to do a blocking for an insert. And you will learn what a blocking is, just working out the details of the moves of the actor. It wasn't even a rehearsal. You will hear from one of the witnesses who walked into the church and saw the defendant kind of playing with his gun. And then you will see evidence or hear evidence that Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were talking to the defendant about doing this insert. And the insert was just supposed to be from here to here. And it was supposed to be of the defendant just slowly taking his gun out of his holster, and just holding it at an angle. The evidence will show that someone asked the armorer to bring the defendant's gun to him. And she did. She brought it into the church, showed it to David Halls, who you will learn was the first assistant director. The gun was empty. Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun to the defendant. But then you will hear that Ms. Gutierrez was given the gun back, and she took it and loaded it with dummy rounds. And what you will learn is that dummy rounds are inert rounds. They look like real rounds, but they are very easy to tell that they are not because they'll rattle. Ms. Gutierrez then went back to the church, showed the revolver to the first assistant director very fast. They only checked about 3 rounds, very quick. And they missed 1 round. You will learn that one of the rounds in that revolver was a real round. And the evidence will show that Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun to the defendant. And what you will learn.
So one thing I would have it just popped in my head, like instead of using terms like round and this and that, I probably would have said bullet. It was a real bullet. So everybody understands it, whether they have firearm experience or not.
Is that once again, the defendant failed to do a gun check or a safety check with this armorer. So he takes the firearm, puts it in his holster. Then Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were doing this blocking. And the evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that the defendant, again, did his own thing. You will hear from an individual by the name of Kent Jorgensen. Mr. Jorgensen will tell you that he's been involved in drafting and revising movie set safety rules. You will learn that these movie set safety rules require actors, like the defendant, to treat every firearm as though it's loaded, to never point the firearm at another person, and to never put your finger on the trigger unless you're prepared to shoot or to destroy whatever's in front of you. The evidence will show that on October 21st, 2021, after that lunch break, the defendant once again violated those set safety rules. And during this blocking, the director had instructed him to just slowly take out that gun and just hold it at an angle. But you will see if the defendant takes it out quickly the first time, points it. And you will hear witness testimony who will tell you the first time he does it, his finger is on or around the trigger. He does it again, takes it out very fast, points it. And once again, you will hear testimony that his finger was on or around the trigger. And the evidence will show that that third and fatal time, he takes it out once again, fast, hammer's cocked, he cocks the hammer, points it straight at Ms. Hutchins, and fires that gun.
So interesting word choice there, and fires that gun, because that's what he said. We know he's going to say fired, not pulled the trigger. But then she goes into, he's going to say he didn't pull the trigger. That's impossible. We had experts look at it. The FBI looked at it. Impossible for this thing to fire. We tested it, did destructive testing on it. He had to pull the trigger. Then I want to hear just kind of the final line or the final minute to her opening statement to give us that end gist of what the jury is going to take away before the state gets to present their evidence, of course, after the defense's opening statement.
Was that the defendant didn't do a gun safety check with that inexperienced Army first. The fatal and one of the main problems that afternoon of October 21st was that the defendant didn't do a gun safety check with that inexperienced armorer. He pointed the gun at another human being, cocked the hammer, and pulled that trigger.
So at the end, she says it. After she said fired first, then she explains the expert said you can't fire without pulling the trigger. And at the end, she says he pulled the trigger.
In reckless disregard for Ms. Hutchins' safety. And you will be convinced that the only true and just verdict in this case, so that true justice can be served, is a verdict of guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Thank you.
All right. So, of course, and I know the Latinist and Bob Cousins, there's going to be a lot of people that might be firearm experts and interested in this case. I love it. I'm pumped. I'm glad you're in the chat. You probably know a million times more about it than I do. But what I'm explaining is I want to make sure every juror understands what I'm talking about. So I think, and I could be completely wrong, but your average person understands I guess incorrectly maybe understands what a bullet is versus a round, right? And so that's why I would have used the word bullet. Do I think it's a big deal? Do I think it's make or break? No, not at all. Olga said, both opening statements did a great job. They got straight to the point and were concise on both sides. I agree with you. And I did like how short they were, how they got to the point. They didn't belabor anything that was unnecessary. It's an 8-day trial. We don't need to have a 2-hour opening statement. NPR, how much do you think this defense team cost, Peter? I mean, just the individual lawyer, I would think the main lawyer would be somewhere between 250 and 500,000. So, I mean, maybe between 500 and 750 total as a team. I don't really know how many lawyers or law firms are involved specifically, but high 6 figures, I would guess. ATIG, I think the defense wasn't going to say it malfunctioned. I don't know. They made it seem like they were going to say that in some of the pretrial motions, and we're going to listen to their opening and see what exactly they have to say about the gun and what kind of order it was in. Sharon said, it's my understanding he's being charged as an actor, not as a producer. Is that correct? Yes, it is correct. And Melissa asked, why didn't the judge allow the state to say that he was the producer? Big plus for the defense, because the state didn't charge him as a producer. They charged him for how he handled the firearm and what he did as the firearm, not the overall safety on set. And he used the firearm and held the firearm and fired the firearm as the actor, not the producer. Creed said Peter State responded in YSL trial saying, 1, Glanville didn't find the motion timely. 2, nothing in the affidavit possibly warrants refusal or recusal because the defendants had zero legal interest in the ex parte. Baloney. So there's a lot to cover on that case. I'll have to catch up when I have time. 18 months is the max prison sentence. Lim, mind my ignorance, but why are there real guns and bullets on a movie set? Because in America, we like things to look real and feel real. So we get as close to the real thing as possible, knowing that, number one, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between live and blank rounds. And number 2, even the wadding sometimes, like what happened to Brandon Lee, can cause death. If stuff gets stuck together, there's ways that this can go bad, but we just care so much about it looking super real in movies, even with today's day and age, CGI and all of that. It's like, what are we doing? Penny, what do defendants sit there and write? Notes to their lawyers, inaccuracies. If they're like, I know this person's going to testify different to that, let's remember that. They said this in opening. They could write one of a million things. They could draw pictures if they want. A lot of times it's better than just, looking off into the abyss or looking angry or laughing or snickering or things like that. Okay. So now let's get to the defense, their opening, and right off the bat, kind of how they start their opening statement here.
May I proceed? Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. This was an unspeakable tragedy, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. He was an actor acting, playing the role of Harlan Rust. An actor playing...
This was a tragedy. He was an actor. He committed no crime. Right there, right off the jump. We got to make sure the jury knows what we're talking about. We got to make sure we're paying attention. He's an actor. This isn't real life. This isn't how you treat real guns. And he gets some good points on cross of some of these officers and how they treated the scene very differently than they would in a normal homicide because this was a movie set. So if they can act differently, why can't the actors? Why can't Alec Baldwin?
A character can act in ways that are lethal, that just aren't lethal on a movie set. These cardinal rules, they're not cardinal rules on a movie set.
I mean, I don't know if they're going to have an expert testify to that. I disagree with him. If he does not have somebody testifying to that, that's just argument. And of course, every good defense attorney argues a little bit in opening. He is no different. He's definitely going to argue some, and they don't object a ton to it. But he's just saying cardinal rules don't apply to acting on a movie set. Holy crap. Don't catch me on a movie set ever with guns.
And I don't have to tell you much more about this because you've all seen gunfights in movies. And the reason that can happen is because safety is ensured before the actor. On this movie set, there were people responsible for ensuring the safety of the set and the firearm. Those people failed in their duties, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. The most critical issue.
You'll hear the theme, reading it over and over again. Alec Baldwin committed no crime. Alec Baldwin committed no crime, because the very main point they're going to make, we're going to hear at the end. And we'll see if it carries the day. Is it smart? Is it not? It could go either way. It's hard to tell at this point. We'll see kind of how the evidence gets laid out, but they are putting all their eggs in one very specific basket, in my opinion, which they show us their tell at the end.
In this case is how a real bullet got on a movie set. The evidence will show that real bullets are never supposed to be on movie sets. Movie sets use dummies and blanks. Movie sets use dummies, fake inert bullets that look like real bullets, they don't go bang, for when you want a close-up of the gun. You can't tell them apart from live bullets by looking at them, which is why live bullets can be nowhere near a movie set. And if the director wants a shot of the gun going, bang, poof, there's blanks that they can use. And those blanks look nothing like real bullets. And they are used for those shooting scenes. And, they'll play these videos that they described of Alec's, firearm in the movie going bang, poof, and people are conditioned to seeing people firing weapons and thinking that's a dangerous act. That's a dangerous act. And they will play those videos and give you that image to try to tarnish him in your eyes. But that's not what happened here.
By the way, this is on 1.25 speed. So I'll put it down normal. He is talking a little bit fast, but we'll listen to his sections on normal speed because he speaks pretty quickly.
On this set, there was a real bullet, something that should never be on a movie set, something which has nothing to do with making a movie. And you will hear no evidence, not one word, that Alec Baldwin had anything to do with that real bullet being brought onto that set.
So there again, pointing the finger at Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. How did a live bullet get on set? He's using the word bullet, by the way. And it wasn't Alec Baldwin's fault. I thought they weighed in the water a little bit of potentially opening the door to some producer stuff if Alec Baldwin was involved, of course. I don't know that he was in all this stuff, but that's what they're saying is the real negligence and the real cause of the death.
The second critical issue in this case is, why did a real bullet get loaded into a prop movie gun? It is undisputed that the bullet was loaded into the gun by the armorer, the person on set whose responsibility it was to ensure the gun was safe. And so picture that moment of the armorer placing a live bullet into that firearm. You hear the prosecutor say, he did this or he performed in a certain way. He picked out the biggest gun as his prop. It's to tarnish
air quotes and eye rolls
him in your eyes. You will hear.
They make sure to let them know they're going to try to tarnish him in your eyes. And this is his wife they keep zooming in on. And then, of course, we all know Stephen Baldwin sitting here, Alec Baldwin's brother, all showing support, the whole Baldwin clan.
There's no evidence whatsoever. No evidence that anything Mr. Baldwin did, that something he did in that moment, that horrible moment when she put that bullet in that gun, none of it had anything to do with Alec Baldwin. And finally, the first assistant director's job, the head of safety, Dave Halls, checks it before it goes to the actor. And he will tell you he made a tragic mistake. He failed to detect a live bullet.
Because we know Halls is going to testify to that. That's what he testified to in Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's trial. He has also pled guilty to his crime. So he is going to say that. But I don't know. Is he going to be a positive witness for Alec Baldwin or not? I don't really know.
Alec Baldwin had nothing to do with that either. So all this evidence that the prosecutor just outlined, all of it, has nothing to do with these critical issues. Nothing. Which leads us to this. The evidence will show that on a movie set, safety has to occur before the gun is placed in the actor's hands. In this case, this unique case on a movie set, the prop gun was placed in Mr. Baldwin's hands and cold gun was announced, meaning it had been checked and double-checked by those responsible to ensure the gun was safe. It was just a prop. They all thought it was just a prop and could do no harm. The actor's job is to act, to rehearse, to choreograph his moves, to memorize his lines. He's Harlan Rust. He's an outlaw running for his life, who in the incident in question, he's pulling a six-shooter to try to defend himself. That's why the gun has to be safe before it gets into the actor's hands. His mind is somewhere else, in the being of another, a century away, an outlaw. he must be able to take that weapon and use it as the person he's acting would. To wave it, to point it, to pull the trigger like actors do, in ways that would be lethal in the real world, but are not lethal on a movie set.
So I hear a lot of people disagreeing with him. I do agree with it to a certain extent. He is doing things you would never do in the real world. Pointing a gun at somebody, pulling the trigger, pretending like he's shooting somebody. The problem is, I disagree that he shouldn't have to check the gun, right? Like that's where I'm just sitting as a person who's not a firearms expert at all. But I'm like, so you're just saying that he's going to point it at people and pull the trigger and he doesn't have to check it because dummy rounds shouldn't be on set. Now, I think the safety checks failed. Halls failed. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed failed. But like, and again, I will wait, right? Because my general inclination is to say that's not what I think. But if they have experts that tell me no actor ever looks at the gun, they're not supposed to, they could mess it up. We tell them not to, they're not allowed to open the gun and look at the ammunition inside. I could have my mind changed, right? But my preconceived notion coming into this case is, gosh, that seems weird that the cardinal rules of firearm safety just don't apply. That's going to be the argument. I don't know. I agree with him that they're used on set like they're absolutely not used in everyday life. But that's going to be something that, I don't know. It's going to be hard to get over common sense wise. It's going to be hard to get over common sense. All right. He talks about, movies are like magic. You got to make it look real, etc. Then he talks more about Halls calling it a cold gun and why that's so important.
First, they take a lunch break. Some folks leave, some don't. They continue the scene. Dave Halls, the head of safety, is actually practicing the movement so they can frame the footage that will happen after lunch. And the prop cold gun comes back. The prop cold gun comes back, cold gun. They call it again. Same gun, again, safe. The first assistant director, Dave Halls, head of safety for the entire film, a man with decades of experience, comes and takes the additional step and inspects the gun, verifies again, cold gun. Everyone relax. Go back to focus on the making of a movie. There's nothing in the gun that can hurt anybody. And Alex sits on that pew. And the creative directors, the crew, they're moving around him, in front of him. And Harlan Rust, he begins, like the prosecutor told you, rehearsing, acting. This is a completely mundane, uneventful, routine act on a movie set. And so everybody carries on. Nobody fathomed, imagined, foresaw any possible danger. They moved around Alec as he practiced his draw. As the prosecutor put it, working out the details of the move and the actor. He does it again, does it in a different way. Nobody bats an eye. And they will tell you that.
And I like some of this. So Lisa C makes a good point. The pharmacist gives you a bottle and says, this is what this is, and gives it to somebody and they die. The nurse is probably not going to be on the hook for that. Might still be, civilly speaking. Lori said, if a person has a peanut allergy, the waiter tells the chef there's no peanut. Chef cooks it in peanut oil. There's no way a waiter would know. But is there no way for Alec Baldwin to know that there are live rounds in the firearm? Is that actually the same? Do they look exactly the same? Do they sound exactly the same? Do they feel exactly the same? I think it's an interesting discussion. Brian said, the problem is that there are rules and procedures that are in place to keep this from happening that AB told the cops he knew all about, but none of which were followed, and he did nothing about it. I'm very open coming into this one because I know I don't know everything about firearms. And I'm interested to see how they argue it. And he makes a legal point at the very end, which is kind of what I said. They're putting all their eggs in one basket, in my opinion, on that we'll get to. Vanessa, so he didn't think there was real ammo on the set. He didn't think there was. Well, let's listen to a little bit more here.
That the investigation revealed that Baldwin was practicing drawing and pointing the weapon of the scene with guidance and instruction from Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza. The gun goes off.
He was practicing with guidance and oversight from Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza. And we know from the pretrial motions that he's going to get in that she told him where to point and what to do.
Everybody's shocked. Alec is startled. He immediately says, I didn't mean to shoot I didn't pull the trigger. Immediately.
He says, I didn't mean to shoot. I didn't pull the trigger.
What the hell just happened? They collectively exclaim. Shock turns to panic. 911 is called.
So then he plays a little bit of it. I think that's an effective argument that he was doing what they told him to do. Nobody thought it was unsafe. He says the prosecutor may present emotionally charged photos, but we're not disputing what caused the death. Thank God they have lapel cameras, he said, so you can see what actually happened. Talk about what happened that day. Alec was open and cooperative and helpful. Then we have the first objection I want to show, because if you remember from the pretrial motions, the defense wanted to make sure that the state wasn't just going to object and start talking. Judge said all objections will happen up at the bench. And I said, yeah, right. Like the state's going to be able to do that. Well, they didn't.
And I witnessed them clear it and saw the bullets.
Okay. So
only one was, the one that was missing, the one that fired, we don't know, but all the other ones were proper.
I can pause this. I can turn this off. Move on. That was just a quick snapshot of the scene.
Let's approach each other. This is Ms. Johnson.
See how hard it was for her to not just spit out the argument? So they do approach. And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be hard. And it gets hard very quickly. We're going to see some of that. All right, we're going to jump ahead to after the sidebar and listen to a little bit more.
It was a cold gun, not an actor's responsibility to check. Safety was ensured before. But I'm about to tell you about the evidence. The gun was double checked, verified it was a cold gun, not an actor's responsibility to check. Safety was ensured before. Alec.
So I assume they're going to have an expert testify to that. Not an actor's duty to check. It was called safe before. Everybody who is an expert and does this, called a cold gun, said it was safe.
Alec was doing his practicing, his rehearsing, his movements. People manipulate and point guns on movie sets. The gun went off during the rehearsal. No one saw him intentionally pull the trigger. It was obviously a tragic accident, but Alec committed no homicide.
All right, so now we start to get kind of closer to the end. It was a tragic accident. So pay attention to how many times he says it was an accident.
Alec took the gun from those charged with its safety. He did not tamper with it. He did not load it himself. He did not leave it unattended. It completed his costume and his character. It was an actor handling a prop and integrating it into the character of Harlan Rust. There was a dedicated professional there, off camera, whose sole sacred responsibility was that prop safety. And Dave Halls, the head of safety, was there by her side. Everyone relied on that. And it was tragic that they let them down.
He also goes into the fact that they were looking for the lethal bullet, looking for something shiny. They couldn't find it. So they ended up focusing the investigation on something else shiny, Alec Baldwin. And they were going to make sure they got that shiny prize, basically, by prosecuting Alec Baldwin.
That's the prop gun. Every other actor. He goes bang bang in movies. He's told when guns are cold or not. He rehearses and acts as his character. Safety proceeds before the actor. Once the actor has the prop gun, he can handle it however a person he's acting as would. A properly cleared gun can't hurt anybody. And so they told you about some of the things that Alex said in the statements that they will take or pick out a few lines from. But he won't tell you anything different, that he took a gun loaded and cleared by the armor and the AD. He made motions with the gun as he was rehearsing. He didn't intentionally pull the trigger. The gun just went off. And he does.
Did you hear what he said there? It's very important. He said he didn't intentionally pull the trigger. The gun just went off. That's not adamantly saying I never pulled the trigger. That's very different to me, right? Words are important. Definitions are important. To me, that's an interesting statement chosen by the lawyer.
Gun as he was rehearsing. He didn't intentionally pull the trigger. The gun just went off. And he does say, I didn't have a problem with the gun before. And this idea, that they said that he didn't want to check because he would offend them. In this moment, he's been doing this for 40 years, the evidence will show. And he has habits. And there are also SAG guidelines that tell actors what to do and what not to do. And the SAG guidelines don't tell actors to check the gun. You will see them. That's not the actor's role. And so I guess the point that they're trying to make.
So we're going to see those SAG guidelines, I assume. I'm very interested, right? Because common sense isn't always right. Common sense does not always rule the day, especially legally speaking. So sometimes you may think, well, this has to be how it is, but maybe it's not. And that's why you have to go into a trial open, regardless of what you think you know.
Is that why in this specific moment, he doesn't break his habit of 40 years and check it differently and sort of insult them this one time? If he had done that and started playing with the gun in that way, they'd be saying, arrogant actor, why is he doing that? So they will play these statements, Alec's statements. You're going to hear a man in shock and grief, a father, an artist, worried about his family. You hear he's, on one of the calls, he's going to meet with the decedent's family, the Hutchins family, and he's upset about that. He will talk to law enforcement. He will call them. He doesn't need a lawyer. He didn't commit a crime. He will call them and offer to meet and speak over and over again. And ask anyone in the acting world. Actors know. Actors rely on armors and point guns and shoot guns.
So we've heard actors that disagree with that and disagree with what Alec Baldwin did. So I'm interested to see what this witness list ends up being and who ends up getting called. John said, is an ammo expert going to be called like in the Hannah Gutierrez trial? Absolutely. I would expect that. Laura said, I'm behind on this case. Do I need to go back and watch the other case? No, I don't really think you do, because they're going to prove this case against Alec Baldwin. You're going to hear about Hannah Gutierrez. You're going to hear about what she did wrong, but this evidence is going to be focused specifically on what Alec Baldwin did or didn't do. Lori, why even have the armor then if they're not held accountable? They are. Multiple people can be liable for the same damage caused. It's not limited to just one person. Peter, what's your take on Alec's mannerisms? From the comments in the chat, it seems like he can do no right. He's the anti-dep. People want him guilty. I am a little surprised at how much people hate Alec Baldwin. I don't know literally anything about him personally. I only know about his movie roles. I like him in some. I don't like him in others. I like some movies. I don't like him in others. I don't really know anything about him as a person, but it really seems to be overall negative. It was kind of like Gwyneth Paltrow. I didn't know people had a feeling about Gwyneth Paltrow. I just thought she was like a generic actress. It's just me personally. So it does seem like everybody's hitting on everything, the way he's dressed, the way he sits, the way his family's there. They got an opinion about everything, and not a lot of it seems to be positive. Caitlin, I keep going back to the expert in Hannah Reid's trial who said if the actor checks the gun, then he needs to check it again. Basically said, not their job. I think we're going to hear a lot of expert testimony in this case, and I'm going to kind of wait and not apply Hannah Gutierrez Reid's experts because I want to hear what the evidence is in this case before this jury.
The Armorers Act, what they did is clear and proven. The head of safety, you will learn, took responsibility for his verification failure. But Alec committed no homicide. So law
Armorers Act has been proven. Interesting. Are we going to get into that? Usually we don't.
enforcement didn't have a homicide case against Alec Baldwin, but they changed the question. You heard the prosecutor tell you about this. Did he pull the trigger? Did he pull the trigger? Did he intentionally pull the trigger? And if he did, of course, that
those are two different things. Did he pull the trigger and did he intentionally pull the trigger? Two different things.
Did he intentionally pull the trigger? And if he did, of course, that would only make his statement incorrect, right? That would mean he would have misspoke, been incorrect. And I want to stop for a moment and just tell you, because you're going to...
Are they starting to brace themselves for maybe some negativity? That maybe what he said was incorrect? Is the FBI and the expert testimony irrefutable by the state that it cannot go off without pulling the trigger? Are they going to call experts that are going to have to agree with the state's experts or the FBI that say you have to pull the trigger for the gun to go off? I'm very interested in that because there's some nuggets in the way he says things. I don't think this guy says anything by accident.
You're going to hear a lot of testimony, expert testimony, like the prosecutor told you, about the gun functioning imperfectly. Did he let the hammer down when he cocked it? Did he hit the trigger? Did he, in a calculated manner, as the prosecutor made a motion, fire the gun like that? And when this issue is discussed, it's easy to sort of pull yourself into courtroom land and away from a movie set. On a movie set, you're allowed to pull the trigger. So even if even if he intentionally pulled the trigger like the prosecutor just demonstrated, that doesn't make him guilty of homicide. He did not know or have any reason to know that gun was loaded with a live bullet. That's the key. That live bullet is the key. That is the lethal element.
And again, he may legally be correct and right. If the experts come and say and prove to this jury that actors have no duty to check, they just hold the gun, they pull the trigger, fine. But think back to the Alec Murdaugh case. Why tell the big lie? That's what so many people and so many jurors and so many of you watching were hung up on and could never really get over, right? Why tell the big lie? So Alec Baldwin misspeaking over and over again in all these public interviews to police and other people was very clear that he never pulled the trigger. If it was a maybe I could have pulled the trigger, but he gives context almost as if to say that would be so much worse if I actually pulled the trigger, right? I don't know. Because legally, I think this defense attorney could be right, depending on what the experts say.
But again, as the prosecutor told you, if they could prove that he intentionally pulled the trigger and he was imperfect, imprecise, wrong with what he said, then maybe you take that and you say he's lying. And if he's a liar, he committed homicide. And so what they do is they take the prop gun. They're blinded by the shine. They're blinded by trying to disprove Alec.
Wait, that's argument, right? This is like just pure prototypical argument in opening statements that could have and should have probably been objected to. But he is really bracing for this. He's getting ready, and I think it's smart because the jury is going to do that. Oh, he's a liar. If he's a liar, can we really trust him? And if we can't trust him, he probably committed a crime. That is the logical step jurors take, and sometimes where prosecutors point in these kinds of cases. So I think it's effective to try to hit that.
They take it and they order a destructive test on the firearm. They order the FBI to take a test that they know will destroy the firearm. It's a pointless, unnecessary test where they blindly try to make this big case by taking a mallet and smashing the firearm.
I think that's a good description and argument. You knew they were going to do this. Any defense attorney would talk about the fact that they destroyed the firearm. It's like, are you crazy? They don't even give us a chance to test it. We knew this was coming.
At the time that they did that, they knew that Alec had adamantly maintained that he was manipulating the hammer and the gun just went off. That the witnesses said it went off out of nowhere. That there are these accidental discharges that happen on the set. That guns have issues in the real world. That this gun had a hair trigger. And the owner's manual of this specific gun actually says that if you load it with a live round or any round in the chamber, in that last position, and you drop it like you see a cowboy in a movie, this type of old cowboy gun can accidentally go off. I don't remember hearing anything about that. The evidence will show that.
So again, malfunction, something wrong with it, negligent design, whatever it may be, it does seem like they're going to try to somewhat blame the gun for this.
So rather than trying to answer the question of what happened, they proceed with the destructive test. They eliminate the one item that could prove what Alex said and believed. They didn't offer him a chance to test the gun. They didn't take the gun apart before they broke it and destroyed it and look at its inner workings. They didn't turn on their videotape. They just destroyed it. Can't ever be tested in the same condition it was in that day. Won't ever allow Alec to show his truth. And the destruction of this gun that you will hear in this evidence is symbolic of this entire case. Because the officers will tell you at that point, they weren't really investigating anymore. They were trying to disprove Alec, to get Alec to have this day.
So John, it's a good question. And let me turn it around, a question for you. Do you find those experts credible? What they did credible? Why they did it credible? Was it necessary? Did they need to do it? And if you think the answer is yes, 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 they're credible. They needed to do it. They proved that they did. I believe their studies. I believe what they say, that you had to pull the trigger. Then maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if you believe the defense and some of the holes and reasonable doubt the defense is going to try to poke, and the defense never had the opportunity to have their experts test it because they destroyed it. And they destroyed it because they were scared that Alec was going to prove his theory. So it's going to really be up to the jury to parse through that and determine exactly how important was that. Caitlin said, to me, negligence lies more in him pointing the gun directly at someone, not failing to check the bullet after being told it was a cold gun. And that's the beauty of this for the state. It doesn't exactly have to be the same. They just have to find that he acted negligently with his use of the firearm or with reckless disregard of everyone else's safety. Studi, question. Peter, the state never charged with first degree, so why make the argument if it's intentional? Well, Studi, This is a great question, and I'm going to answer it when we get to the end of the defense's opening.
And so after the destruction of the firearm, they hired some expert witnesses you heard about to pick up the pieces, so to speak. And the state retained Lujan Haig, an expert with over half a century of experience. And he will come into court and he will tell you he's never seen anything like this in his entire career. They conducted a pointless test, a test that would lead to inevitable destruction of the firearm. There were other correct tests that they could have done to prove whether or not it could have accidentally discharged. None of the experts can test the gun in the condition it was in on the day in question. Why? Not because of something that Alec Baldwin or the crew members of Rust did. They were all clear. The gun just went off. But because of something that law enforcement did, and they deprived him of that opportunity. However, Lujan Haig will tell you that in his analysis, he did find modification that he thought likely pre-existed the FBI testing. And what that modification means and how it impacted the gun is hard to perfectly know, of course, but it was a modification on an important part, the critical part of the firearm. And it was important enough for them to put into a report and to write a new opinion about. They felt this revelation had to be sent to prosecutors, and they maintained that position that this modification was a matter of import for almost a year. And then a few weeks ago before trial, they just took it back. They just took it.
And he starts really going down to the fact that how far will they go to get the shiny object? He even says, and I think this is a quote, they push themselves to the edge of truth and beyond. Definitely taking some shots at the prosecutor. And there were some pretrial motions on that as well, that they said they weren't going to take shots. And that was kind of a vague shot. They clearly argue that the overarching workplace issues are not Alec's fault. He didn't hire Hannah Gutierrez. He's not in charge of all the safety. Dave Halls is. All sorts of civil lawsuits. And that's basically where this case belongs, in the civil court. The state does object to some of the argument at that point. Talks about how they'll have gaps in the evidence. Makes a point how they aren't going to call certain witnesses, which they also brought up while questioning some of the witnesses in this case. And then let's get the last minute here of their closing so we can see, again, them focus on their main point and one of the main things they're going to argue.
And so they will play the videotapes of Alec Baldwin, the actor, acting. They will show you perhaps over and over again him in shooting scenes. Bad Alec shooting a gun the wrong way in a movie scene. They will try to get you to picture that and forget that this was a movie set in the first place. And you will see actors in a Western acting. And your mind might go to your favorite gun scene in your favorite movie. You may picture actors and actresses doing exactly what you see here. The other actors in Rust are doing the same thing that Mr. Baldwin was doing. But when you come back from that moment, remember, this is a homicide trial. And you will see soon that the reason they play those videos of him over and over.
He also keeps mentioning homicide, the word homicide with cops. This is a homicide trial. Homicide, homicide, homicide. What does most people think about when they think about homicide? The big M, right? First degree, capital M. That's what he wants in this jury's mind. Homicide, homicide, homicide.
Is because they don't have any evidence of actual homicide. And you will learn the truth. Not a day goes by when we don't wish Alec had saved your life. But never, the witnesses will tell you, in the history, is something that an actor has done. Intercepted a live bullet from a prop gun. No actor in history. No one could have imagined or expected an actor to do that. So just remember that truth. So when they cry out justice, justice is truth. This was an unspeakable tragedy. Alec Baldwin committed no crime. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so I missed some of the clips I must have had in here that talked about them saying an accident over and over again, that this was an accident. This was not intentional. So why did they destroy the gun, Vanessa said? They're going to tell you they had to do this testing. It was very important. It proved their theory, but the gun was destroyed at the end. Sounds like not everybody's going to say that, even some state witnesses, so we'll have to wait to see exactly how it's presented. Kay said, I got a jury duty summons. I'm so excited. That's awesome. Be fair and impartial. Do your duty. Hope, David Hall should be on trial. He already pled guilty. He's a criminal at this point, right? He's been convicted. Michelle, is he trying to say because he didn't intentionally pull the trigger that it can't be a homicide? That's what he's trying to say. Malfunction or accidental action are different. So multiple theories, but at the end of the day, he's saying this is a movie set. It was an accident. He had no intent. It can't possibly be a homicide. That's their overarching theme. And it comes out in the witnesses as well. The first witness is Nicholas Lefleur, a Santa Fe cop. Doesn't seem overly enthusiastic or happy to be here. He describes a really sad scene. We see some very just like horrific video of Helena Hutchins and them working on her. He talks about how she went to the ambulance and then into the helicopter. And then there was just a little interesting moment where Morrissey gets annoyed that the defense didn't give her the right redaction. And I'm wondering if we're going to see more of that. We hear people talking to each other. She asks, does that concern you? He says yes, because they could be getting each other's story straight, but he didn't seem overly confident. It's almost like Morrissey had to feed him that. And then they start talking about how Alec Baldwin was talking to all these people and whether that was a problem and a big deal. So we'll listen to them describe that a little bit.
That my unit was clear across being used as a post, and just because I didn't know what we had right there, to maintain cooperation with people involved.
Must be what it was, yeah. So the 911 call, I don't have it clipped, Mila, sorry. But the 911 call is where it said accidental. And he said that. And he also asks multiple people that. Multiple witnesses. He says accident. It was called in as an accident. You called it an accident. Why aren't you calling it an accident anymore? It's been such a big focus already in one day of trial. Hall got a suspended sentence. I get it. But he still pled. He took the deal they offered. They wanted to get the bigger fish, it seems, which was Alec Baldwin.
Well, it sounds like you gave him an option. You let him choose. Is that right?
Yeah, he wanted to stay right there, and figured if I could keep him there, I didn't see a big problem with it until later on when people were talking and whatnot.
And did you give?
Put him in a squad car. He didn't detain him. He let him sit out there. But Alec was, disobeying his orders by talking to people is what the prosecutor's trying to get at in this direct.
Mr. Baldwin instructions about whether or not he could speak to people?
I did tell him to stop talking.
And
even it doesn't seem like he's trying to press or say, oh, he was so horrible. I told him not to talk to people, but of course he was. He was, getting people's stories straight or trying to tell them what to say. He didn't really try to push that, but it definitely felt like the state was trying to get that out of this witness, and the defense had a pretty good response.
Instructions to the other witnesses that were around?
I didn't tell them, but I told them you had to sit there and not talk to nobody.
Okay.
I got it. What do you got?
And then they show some clips where he's clearly is talking to people. And he, said, I eventually had to tell him to stop again. And she just keeps pointing that out, And then I thought it was kind of funny at the end of direct. He's like, do you remember? Did you hear anything that they were talking about? Baldwin and these other potential witnesses? And he's like, well, I kind of remember Baldwin asked him what kind of cigarettes he was smoking and if he could have one. It's like, maybe not quite the point you were trying to prove as the prosecutor. Then right off the rip for Cross, they get into this comment that this person made about Alec Baldwin. And there's some objections, of course, speaking objections. We're going to play a few of these through Cross because that this was going to be a problem.
An actor out of character. Fair?
Yes.
And in fact, he was very shocked, if you could picture Alec Baldwin in a pale state, very unsure of himself. You could say an actor out of character. Fair?
Sure.
Object to the former question. It is Mr. Spyro testifying in the question. Okay.
Already she's doing her speaking objections, telling the jury what she thinks is wrong with what the defense lawyer is doing.
Maybe approach.
The defense lawyer is like, seriously? And by the way, she does this so much during his cross. He gets no rhythm. It's very annoying. I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem. Honestly, I don't think it's an appropriate way to try a case the way that she's doing it. And she lost so many of these objections. I think she's pretty effective in how she goes hard at people. And, depending on if a jury likes certain things about her, I think she can be very effective. But this type of stuff would annoy the crap out of me. It's not appropriate lawyering. And people may disagree with me, but it seemed overly frustrating to me watching. I can only imagine how the defense attorney felt actually handling the case. By the way, she loses this objection. He is able to get into it with this witness because this witness must have said it. He reads it, so he must have said it at another time or agreed with it at another time.
Dispatch that came over to your radio, sir, before you got to the scene was a dispatch for an accidental shooting by a prop gun, correct?
I believe that's what was told to me, yes.
Okay. And you've testified to that previously, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the dispatch report, you know that you received that wording, accidental discharge, several times, right?
I believe so.
Okay. So I want to ask you, how come when you described it today in court, how come you didn't include the word accident when you testified before this jury?
I'm not one to say if it was an accident or not. Just there to initially respond to it, and then the detectives determine out whether or not it was an accident.
Well, sure, but every other time
Like, it's not my decision to determine whether it was an accident or not.
you've been asked about this, you've said it was an accident. And now today at the trial of Alec Baldwin, when you're talking to this jury, you left that word out. Isn't that true?
Not intentionally, no.
Did you meet with the prosecutors before you testified here today?
So he basically says he met with them a little bit, but mostly just in the pretrial interviews. I always think stuff like this is funny. Deborah said, you always support the defense. You're not objective. I don't know if you listened to the first half of this video, but you may have missed some parts of this. Is what you think. Jojo, in my opinion, I don't think you should be allowed to destroy evidence. There's an ongoing investigation or trial. That seems shady to me. We've had cases that have literally been thrown out when law enforcement has destroyed evidence by testing it or otherwise, or accidental destruction. Sometimes it is a big no-no. Donna, Australia has bought in workplace laws that make the employers responsible from the top down, criminally or civilly, because civilly, that's pretty much how it is here too. Criminally, it's a little bit different. Peter, why was Alec originally charged and charges were dropped? Now he's charged again and on trial. Is that common? It's not uncommon, but it's not the most common way to do it. And basically it's just prosecutorial discretion. New prosecutors came on the case. Maybe they looked at it a little bit differently. They didn't think they could win before. Then these prosecutors thought they could win. As long as it's within the time period, it can happen. Then after lunch, he hammers home accident with this witness big time. What is it? 5:37 is the next clip. Let's take and listen to the next clip here.
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear anybody on the 911 call mention Alec Baldwin at all?
No.
I asked you before we broke about a prior statement. I asked you if you made a prior statement that we talked about a few times. So I'm just going to approach quickly and refresh your recollection. This is November 30th, 2023, your pretrial interview, Officer Lefleur, and I'm just going to ask you to read down here.
Your Honor, and again, Mr. Spiro is testifying as he's handing it to the witness.
Just identify what the document is and then.
I mean, that's the type of stuff he was saying in his pretrial motion. He's like, I don't really know how to deal with this, but she always just kind of like yells stuff out in front of the jury. Why is she doing that? Can we tell her not to do that?
For an actual shooting by a prop gun. So it appeared to be, and what the dispatch said, it was an accidental shooting by a prop gun. So I didn't know if there was any. I took it as the way how everybody was acting, and that the individual who claimed to have been holding the firearm was still there, that there was
Objection, Your Honor.
the way he was.
Objection, Your Honor.
I mean, it seems like he's impeaching him with a prior inconsistent statement or refreshing his recollection.
As I was walking back, my question was, did that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. And so is it in fact true that in your earlier statement you said, and it came in like and appeared to be what the dispatch said it was, an accidental shooting by a prop gun. So I didn't know if there was any. I took it as the way how everybody was acting, and that the individual who claimed to have been holding the firearm was still there, that there was the way he was, his demeanor was that there wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say,
Yes.
You made that statement, correct?
Yes.
And I asked you also.
So that was important. And he had to get that point across that he did make that statement.
Whether you remembered receiving any information as to the ammunition, whether they be prop or otherwise, that was at the scene. If you recalled, Duran Curtin, one of the individuals in the church, giving you information. Do you remember that?
There's a lot of people in the church giving information. Can you identify which one it was?
Sure. I asked you, do you remember whether or not somebody told you that Sarah was shaking and going through the book?
Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay. This is hearsay coming in. Can we approach? I don't know what to do.
And she says, I don't know what to do. She's exacerbated in front of the jury. Again, that's frustrating. That's frustrating. I mean, if that shows some kind of bias, okay, but to me, like that is, I don't care who was doing that, I'd be frustrated and annoyed at it. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit and talk about whether or not Alec Baldwin was actually disobeying orders of this officer on set.
Heard it in that detail. Body cameras pick up more audio than our ears do.
By the way, he was allowed to ask that question as well. And partially because the state has entered his body-worn camera into evidence, and those statements are made on his body-worn camera, so they're already in evidence. If it's already in evidence, you can ask him about it.
Okay. You also testified that the gentleman in the orange jacket came up to you and said, Alec pulled the trigger, or words to that effect. Remember that testimony?
That's what he said, yes.
Yeah, and you know that witness has stated absolutely he did not say it pulled the trigger, correct?
At that point, I didn't know if he said that or not.
Okay. And then I just want to ask you about one other thing we talked about this morning. Was I asked you about your testimony on direct that Mr. Baldwin was effectively disobeying police orders. Do you remember that testimony on direct?
Yes.
And over the lunch break, have you had a chance to reflect on that testimony?
Sure.
Okay. Do you think it's a fair, honestly, sir, a fair characterization to this jury to say that Mr. Baldwin was disobeying police orders at the scene?
I think that's a great question because it does not seem like he was disobeying the police orders. He seemed very cooperative. Now, maybe he was getting special treatment. I think he was getting special treatment, but that is kind of, and it didn't seem like this officer even bought it. And this lawyer picked up on it and he asks him, he's like, bro, are you serious about that? Is that fair? And I got to give this guy credit. This officer, he gives an honest answer.
He was given an order, but I didn't repeatedly tell him not to. That was on my bad.
And so don't you think that given what actually happened at the scene, that really, in all fairness to Mr. Baldwin, he wasn't really disobeying police orders, was he, sir?
To an extent, yes.
I give him credit for that. I really do. I give him credit for that answer. Lynn, can they argue these safety measures if you are in the line of fire? You would have a face mask, goggles, stand behind a perspex screen, and minimize the number of people by the camera. I really, a lot of this stuff I have to wait to hear expert witness testimony on. And Corey asked something similar. Good day. Don't actors point guns at people a lot on set? That's what I would have thought, common sense wise. Some actors have come out and say you actually point it kind of next to them or whatever. I want to hear how the expert testimony comes out. I really do. Why is the judge not interfering during speaking objections when she agreed yesterday it wouldn't be allowed? Spiro can't say anything without looking like a jerk. It's really frustrating. You don't want to come across as, being a bully or hammering somebody when they're doing that. That's why he tried to handle it professionally beforehand, because it can and will get out of hand. And I thought the judge wasn't even going to allow it. It seems like they're at least allowed to do objection, hearsay, stuff like that, which I think is appropriate. But Morrissey always takes it further. And Spiro seemingly doesn't know, what to do. He's like, I thought we handled this. We'll see if he handles it again with some kind of reminder to the judge. So after Morrissey on redirect says, you weren't coached, et cetera, she literally nukes the defense's accident argument. So the defense is accident, not intentional. This is a homicide. Why are we even here? And she comes up, and at the end of her redirect, this is amazing stuff here. If the jury's following and picking up. Here we go. And by the way, you might not always be able to get away with questions like this with cops in front of the jury, but the defense opened the door, talking about homicide, talking about accident, talking about negligence, talking about lack of intent, things like that.
You were asked several questions on cross-examination about the statement that you made that it didn't seem like Mr. Baldwin intended to commit the act. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
Do you know what the crime that Mr. Baldwin is charged with?
I believe involuntary manslaughter.
Is involuntary manslaughter an intentional homicide?
No, ma'am. Not my recollection of the New Mexico State statute.
He's like, nope, not according to the statute. It's like bang, bang. That was huge. From the first witness, and if I were her or this entire prosecution team, I would ask that to every single witness that knows the answer. Every single one. And maybe as I'm prepping some cops, I may say, by the way, do you know what he's charged with? I wouldn't tell him. I wouldn't force him. I wouldn't tip him. I would just say, do you know what he's charged with? Do you know if that's intentional? Whatever. During the prep. Nothing wrong with that. because I think that's incredibly effective with how the defense is presenting their case. So while I may be annoyed at some of her style, she gets some really good points across and does a really good job at times. The next witness was up. Was this the one that was quick? No, Benavidez. He was at the scene. He basically locked down the scene. This poor guy, has to give excuses as to why he didn't put things in an evidence bag or didn't block off the scene. It was chaotic. There was 200 plus people there. The cart was a total mess. He didn't exactly do a great job. But one of the big defense questions on cross was, you didn't put Alec Baldwin in a police car. In fact, nobody's ever detained and arrested Alec Baldwin. I didn't think that was a great line of questioning personally. It's borderline not proper. But don't worry. On redirect, they got him there again, because that was a big focus of cross. And again, a lot of the crosses have been short and sweet and kind of to the point. But they did a good job getting into it, because again, the defense opens the door, and I thought the state had a good response here. This is redirect.
Did you have any involvement in this prop truck that you were asked about?
No, at the time I didn't know anything about a prop truck.
Why did you place Ms. Gutierrez in the back of your police car?
She was a main person that was handling the firearm. And common sense told me that detectives wanted to speak to her.
Were you asked
You were the main person that was handling the firearm. That's good for the defense.
about where to place Mr. Baldwin?
No, I believe Deputy Lefleur asked me, but there was so many witnesses on his side. I just told him to keep him separated from everybody and everybody from each other as much as possible.
Now, is the reason he was not placed in a police car because he wasn't a suspect?
At the time, I don't remember if somebody told. At the time, I don't remember if somebody told me he was handling the gun. I don't remember. So no.
So he wasn't placed in a police car just because there were other reasons? I'll rephrase your own. You placed Mr. Baldwin in a police car, but you placed Hannah. Is it because Mr. Baldwin was different from Hannah, or was it other reasons?
It was other reasons. Like I said, Deputy Lefleur had a lot of people on his side of the movie set. So keeping one person in a police car, you got to watch them, and then you got to watch everybody else. So he was able to watch everybody all at once.
I have a moment here.
Sorry, my notes were wrong on that. That was horrible. That was not good at all. I had notes that they came back to that. That was horrible. That was so clunky, and it almost made it sound like Hannah Gutierrez was the suspect. She was the one handling the firearm, and they didn't think Alec Baldwin was. Oops. I don't know what I was listening to, but it wasn't that. Not great. Not great ending by the prosecutor. Morrissey probably would have done a better job, maybe, but not a great job there tying that all together at the end. Then we get the next cop who went and got the projectile from Souza's body, and the defense gets out in cross that not once did Souza mention Alec Baldwin. State objects and lost that objection because it's not hearsay, because it wasn't said. People said, I really like that witness. I thought he was okay. I feel bad for him because the investigation wasn't great. So he's got to try to work around that. I really don't think the investigation was great. The last witness that's not done yet is the crime scene technician. She talks about live rounds, dummy rounds, what the differences are, blanks, talks about the holster, talks about the firearm, talks about the cart, the boxes, how and why things are tested, when they are and aren't swabbed for DNA. A lot of the testimony we heard in Hannah Gutierrez Reed's trial, not the most important evidence against Alec Baldwin, right? They're setting the scene. I thought the end of redirect of the first witness, where they got off the it wasn't intentional, or it's not an intentional crime. I thought that was the most effective part of the day today as far as these witnesses. These are not the most important witnesses. They are foundational witnesses, the experts on firearm safety, what actors are supposed to do, what duties are on set, what the cardinal rules are. Those are going to be the most important witnesses. So not the most fireworks start as far as witnesses go, but they're laying the foundation, and we'll see as they continue to go. Peter, our bar for bad investigations is Canton. So now everything looks good. Yeah, I got to be honest, it's sad to see how many bad investigations there are generally just in the world of criminal defense, or of criminal cases, prosecution and defense, I should say. So that's day one. The big chunk obviously was opening statements, but witnesses have started. The plan is tomorrow night, we're going to do another recap. We'll see how it goes. If you guys are interested, we'll keep doing it. Friday, I'm going to the Morgan Wallen concert. Actually, if anybody else is going to Tampa, let me know, hit me up. Hope I see you there. So if you guys still want it, maybe on Saturday, I'll do a recap of Friday, and then we'll make decisions next week on what you guys want and the content you're asking for. If you want other stuff, we can audible and pivot to other stuff. Hit the like button if you want to watch this trial and you want more breakdowns on this trial. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the reminder bell so you get alerted if and when we do future coverage on this case. I appreciate you guys joining me here. But until the next time, actually, let me get this last comment here from Olga. Is someone giving you timestamps that are most important? Or are you reacting for the first time, Peter? I don't want to give any spoilers accidentally for future questions. So no, usually as I'm listening, I'll just jot down a timestamp real quick. And based on where the timestamps are, I kind of remember what happens and what was said in those timestamps. But sometimes I remember incorrectly, as you can see here. And then Donna said, criminally. Okay. So that's all I got for real this time. Until next time. Oh, I can help you with that. Will Alec testify? I don't know. I want to wait and see how the trial goes to give you kind of a better, more educated guess. My guess before the trial was probably he would testify. If I had to bet, if I had to put my money down, I'd say yes, but I want to see how the trial goes. That's usually when the decision is made. The defense attorneys and the client look and see how the trial goes, and then they make their decision. All right, everybody. Peace out. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.